Okay, you're live.
This is, I'm Rich Westman, and this is the Senate Transportation Committee, and we're resuming testimony with Secretary Flynn. And we're sorry we're a little late. We had a little technical difficulty. And Secretary, you've got as much time as you'd like.
Thank you very much, Chair Westman. And for the record, my name is Joe Flynn. I'm Secretary of the Agency of Transportation. With me today in the room, seated near the window, Chief Engineer Jeremy Reed and DMV Commissioner Andrew Collier. And then to my right, Maureen Parker, the Deputy Director of Finance and Administration, Todd Law, the Director of Fleet, Ernie Patno, the Director of Maintenance, and Michelle Boomhauer, the Director of Policy Planning and Intermodal Development. Director Morse is in House of Popes with our CFO today. That's why she's not here. So we're here to talk about, what's been accomplished. And I'm going to run through this, and clearly any questions that this causes you to have, please let me know. And I think the goal is to go through this timely and then allow you all to ask all of us anything that you would like and direct the conversation.
And this presentation is not posted right now, but will be shortly.
Correct. We will.
I just got it and posting it right now.
Okay,
Perfect.
great. Okay. Is the video the blue link below?
Yeah, just click on that link.
And box.
And just hit allow, yeah.
There we go.
Fingers crossed. Maybe if you highlight the whole thing.
Yeah, I'll get the,
Let me see.
I think
Oh, it's going on yours. Huh, why is it not going on yours?
Yeah.
No, it's not that. Well,
Probably have to send it to the shared screen. Yeah, it opened in a different window probably.
okay. All right. So we'll just go here. And we're gonna go here. And then I don't know.
On and off ramps to Interstate 89.
It's not going through. Can we shut that volume off or no?
No, because then everybody else won't be able to hear.
Wow. That's not
If
fun.
you shut, maybe, wait, was it coming out of,
It came out of the PowerPoint.
but not out of the camera?
I shared the file. I shared the screen.
Can you mute Joe's computer?
It's already muted, but that is also mute. If they turn it on, then both go on. Why don't you just look at the nice
We'll look at
picture,
the pictures.
which is also going in slow motion. Maybe we won't look at the pictures. Because it's not coming through.
Is that random?
Well, no, we can talk to this. Really, let's just start it again here.
Oh, you don't need to start it again. They've all been
Right.
seeing it.
I think one of the things about this, what the engineer said, and Jeremy can certainly lend more to this, but this wasn't just a bridge project. It was a multi-components to this. It was on and off ramps. It was the bridge. It was the intersection at Route 2 and Route 7. A lot of individually complex projects rolled into one large project, all at the same time, handling thousands of vehicles every day. And I can say that because I'm one of them who travels through that and did every single day. So it really was a pretty unique situation. What we're talking about here is the rapid successes that we've seen in rail, in particular with upgrading 29 rail bridges the last calendar year, which is further on this as well. And I believe this will say, and we'll follow it in a further PowerPoint, that we are up in the 90% of our bridges today on our rail system are at the 236,000 pound national standard, whereas about 10 years ago, it was about 30%.
Wow.
But 29 bridge projects were finished, were done, started and finished of last year. The new facility, most of you are aware of this, excuse me. We built this, it opened up about a year ago. This is our first full winter out of this facility. Right off the interstate at exit 20, the second exit in St. Albans. It cuts our time to get to the interstate probably by a factor of 3, if not more. It's sufficient. It's a beautiful facility, and we're certainly happy to take you up there to show it to you anytime you'd like to take a field trip. It's a net zero, I think is the correct terminology. It's solar and pellet with solar for EV as well as EV charging, as you see right here.
What was the floor? It looked like it was plywood floor.
No, I don't know what I didn't catch that, but no, it's not. It's probably radiant heat, but
Yes, they had mats underneath the
Yeah.
plow, so
It looks like.
oh, in there, yeah.
So I'll get you back to the other screen now.
Well, you have a drone videographer at least, is who we.
Yeah, well, they have the drone.
Yeah.
Can you go under bridges?
That's great.
Yeah.
All right, so the first series of talking points are going to be regarding the highway division, Jeremy and Aaron. And you can see the staffing. I'm not intending to, but happy to if you'd like, but read everything you see. The picture you're looking at is Industrial Avenue in Williston, Williston Road. It's a busy intersection. It has been forever. It was a intersection that required an awful lot of utilities movement. Goes back into the throes of the pandemic. We had some delays simply because the utility companies couldn't get some of the utilities they needed to move fast enough. But it's a tremendous enhancement. That used to be single in and out. From the direction you're looking at, you've got Ireland Concrete up there, which is SD or was SD Griswold for years, plus the Avenue A, B, C, and D industrial parks, so tremendous amount of truck traffic. And while it's not in this picture, but at the other end of Industrial Avenue, we have that other project that's similar to this, where 2A meets Industrial Avenue. But you see the different bureaus within the highway division: construction and materials, operations and safety, project delivery, and asset management. And then the various individual offices between each of those. Just highlighting a few of the projects again. You saw exit 17 in the video, but as I said, it was the bridge, but it was also the Route 2 and 7 interchange. And again, there's just a lot happening there. There's a convenience store on the corner. The amount of traffic that actually comes off the interstate heading to Milton and heading to Colchester, on top of course, what heads west to the islands and to New York. This is the major thoroughfare to the Grand Isle Ferry. Tremendous number of commuters every day from New York. They go right by my house in South Hero. It really, from a building perspective, it's impressive. But I really have to say the logistics of this project were tremendously successful. And I say that not just sitting here as a secretary, but as somebody who drove that every day throughout the entire length of that project. And frankly, the comments that compliment how well it was handled from people I know who live in the county who reached out to me were 10 times the number of the 2 or 3 who reached out critical. And that's just people choosing to reach out. So often that's sort of the sentiment that we don't otherwise hear. On my right, the slide of the Reedsboro Bridge, a pretty complicated project as well. Just setting the temporary bridge was a big effort. It's a large span. The structure that's being replaced is a complicated project. It's going to be a long span, 370 feet, I believe, and it's also going to carry the town water and sewer system under it. So again, this is underway right now, right down near the Mass border. Royalton, if you're traveling 89, Senator White, certainly your neighborhood, coming back and forth from White River. This is underway right now. These are the north and southbound barrels, the bridges right there when you get off. Complete rehab of both of those. And then the picture to my right is the bridge in Quechee. Again, it's a historic structure. It's a structure that we took a lot of input on from the public, a number of meetings, diverse feelings, including not just business and tourism, but personal and emotional because of some of the history related to the bridge. And I will say, because I know one individual, you know, and there's a high degree of empathy that went into how this bridge was being ultimately delivered because of some of the history around it as a structure. And frankly, I'm proud of the agency for the decisions that it made and the fact that we take some of that into account as well, as we should. You've seen these slides before. These are basically, I can go back and date myself, but results-based accountability. These are our bar charts showing bridge condition. We are, you know, really, while you do see some purple at the bottom of each of those columns, which indicates poor condition, every time I say that, I emphasize that is not correlated to safety. If we have a bridge that we are at all questioning the safety of, we close it immediately. And then we investigate it further. So deteriorated condition is not safety. We are frankly in good shape, if you will, data wise on our bridges in the state of Vermont at a national level and at a regional level. The devil in those details, and you've heard us testify to that before, is that much of the supplemental grant money we've seen available thus far, and we don't know what, of course, reauthorization will provide. We have not been as successful as we would have liked. And the word we hear is because you've actually done such a good job maintaining your bridges in Vermont, we want to direct that money to other states where the conditions are worse. We don't rest on the laurels here because once you allow a bridge to get away from you, it's extremely expensive to get it back, if you will. But the work here shows, I think, in the data that we present on the bridge condition. We moved to pavement. We've all had this conversation. I know you know this chart. We can point to the fact that from you see 22, 23 were relatively constant with respect to poor and very poor. There was a decline in what's measured in poor and very poor, which is invertedly good news, if you will, for the calendar of 24. I don't believe we completed all the 25 data. That's why you just don't see that now. I will say the other thing you've heard me say as well. So anyone watching this or bored enough to watch this or watch me regarding pavement condition, we don't forget the fact that if you live in Vermont and drive in Vermont in an area that's poor or very poor, that's 100% of your experience. We understand that. So it's not lost on us when we show these numbers, but we are currently at least showing a drop in those conditions. And of course, we all know the risks we face going forward. And none of this is to, not address that, which we will, of course, over the rest of the months here.
Go ahead.
Yes.
We have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to that point you're making right now, I've been anecdotally asking constituents, what percentage of roads do you think are very poor quality in Vermont? And across the bat, almost everyone starts with 30%, 20%, 70%. I've never gotten anyone since our 18th meeting who has said as low as what it actually is. So I'm wondering if you have a reflection on that, if that is because people are experiencing maybe municipal road quality being lower, or why do you think that perspective is being shared, at least anecdotally?
No, that's a great question. And there might be three things that come to my mind immediately. One might be, I'm not sure that any of us other than those of us who know about it, you know, in this room, including this committee, have awareness necessarily as where the state road or the municipal road starts and stops, or the town road. So I think that's part of it. I think that, again, it depends on how far a person drives and who are you asking, and what is their motoring experience with respect to where do they travel?
Yeah.
And like I said a moment ago, if where they travel is more local and our roads in this case happen to be in worse shape, that's probably their experience. And then I think just as people, how many times have all of us heard, in particular in the transportation space, well, it was the worst mud season ever. It was the driest summer ever. It was the dullest foliage season ever. It's the worst road ever, you know, and so, and that's not to say that what people are experiencing isn't real to them, but I do think there's a piece of that as well. And, you know, regarding winter so far, and we may talk more about this later, there's a completely different experience between a snowstorm that we plow off and what people see when they drive, or an ice storm like we had a week and a half ago, which the results of which can linger for several days, as you know. I mean, the wheel tracks can be fine and it can meet the snow and ice control plan, but when it's 16 degrees or 8 degrees, the wind's blowing and the snow is swirling around like little dirt devils. In order you can say this, and Todd more than I, with more real experience, but it's much harder there. And you do end up with, you know, ice along the shoulders and sometimes in the center of the road if it's a 2-lane Vermont state road. And so the perception of that as well can probably influence the answer somebody gives you.
It's true. I've only been asking in winter.
Right, well,
Thank you.
so,
Well, I would just say, you might go, if I'm on a 40-mile trip and I get one pothole, that
right,
colors the whole picture.
that's a good point as well. Our crash data, and you probably heard this from the prior testimony. First thing I'd say is it's not complete yet for calendar 25. While the year is done, there are things like toxicology that are still out on some crashes, and I'm sure there are still investigations. I mean, obviously, an unfortunate reality is a fatality, but causation is really what is not always quickly determined as far as impairment or anything like that. So the data is not quite complete yet for the month, but what the takeaways are is that while there were fewer fatal crashes in the last year, there were, I'm sorry, yeah. So slightly larger. This is pretty small, Michelle. We're slightly higher on both fatal crashes and fatalities. One of the things that's interesting in looking through this, which I did the other day, you'll see alcohol only related fatalities are down quite a lot, which is encouraging news. However, drug related fatalities have flipped the scenario, which is not encouraging news. And then, of course, you've got it's the combination of drugs and alcohol. One of the other things that just frustratingly remains consistent is the number of crashes, the number of fatalities where the person who died was not wearing a seatbelt. And while in Vermont, and I don't know what the testimony was prior to me, but we are, I believe, in the low 90s as far as compliance for seatbelt use in Vermont. We are among the highest in the country, even without primary stop, which is really good news, and that has crept upward. However, we unfortunately remain kind of static at well over 50% of the people who die in Vermont on Vermont roads in a vehicle where a seatbelt was available, because we have to make sure we're not counting pedestrians or an ATV or a motorcycle or a bicycle. But let's talk cars and pickup trucks. We are still about the same percentage of people, and it's just staggering. And unscientifically, I will tell you that what I see when I get these reports every single week, and I'm sure that we could substantiate my comment here with real data, but what we're really seeing as well is young males.
Hmm.
Which, you know, when I was a middle-aged guy, it wasn't that uncommon to hear older people. Because maybe it was generational. They lived most of their lives, or they drove half their lives. They certainly started their driving experience without seatbelts, even in cars. And might have just said, I'm not doing this. But, you know, you'd think, I'm just, you know, as a guy, as a dad, as a granddad, you just think that young people today would have heard this so many places. And to see in young males in particular, we see that a lot, which is, I guess perhaps one of the things I take away from that is there's opportunity here for more educational moments, I would hope. But
I don't think they're dismantling the belt, because I want to strangle somebody when I hear it for like 30 seconds, like I'm in driving.
yeah, well, I think what a lot of people do is they buckle the belt behind them.
Behind.
Yeah,
That's
you just buckle it and then get in the seat. And it could be a bit uncomfortable, but I guess, yeah, because we would have to assume that in most cases, the vehicle has to have them, of course, in order to have an inspection sticker.
Right.
And I'm sure there are some instances it could have been a vehicle that is yet to be inspected because of somebody might have just got one. Right. So that's a troubling statistic that just seems to be holding true.
We did have safety people in
Yeah.
just before you, and they were quite good, and they do have the chart.
Okay.
on how many people are wearing belts, and a comparison to the national average for us, we don't have, but we're gonna do that. I'm asking, particularly asking those questions because I know the chair that was in this seat, for a very long time, Senator Mazza would have been asking those questions.
Yes. Sure, he appreciates you continuing that.
Yeah.
District maintenance and fleet, again, as far as the orange column, you're looking at our current total staff, the current total appropriation. This is, of course, state fiscal 26. Photographs are of District 8. And then you see along the bottom how district maintenance is broken up in the 5 regions around Vermont, with the pertinent districts within each of those regions. But a little bit of recollection here on some of the storm issues that we've had. 2025 was literally the 3rd year in a row, same day, that we had damage in Vermont. It was much less, of course, than it was in 2023 and in 2024, with 23 being the worst as far as the amount of damage and the number of and the widespread nature of it. But this is up in the Sheffield, Kirby area, just north of Lyndonville, figure like West Burke. They got hit extremely hard, and you know, including some of the town roads up in that area as well. This is the event that the appeal of the original denial is related to. So the pictures you're seeing here. And part of that, not that it's in our slide, that's the EM shop, but part of that was there was some data that we did not have as a state from some of the towns. And so the publicity around the denial caused us to ask more questions of the towns, because we were hearing things anecdotally. Much more information came in, which was frankly grounds for the appeal.
Okay.
So that is still out, but you'll see it's typical damage to what we see often. And it doesn't necessarily take a horrific event, but with, you know, debris in the waterway and fast water, often what will happen is, you know, you'll see a culvert get blocked and the water's going to find a way around it, or a bridge get blocked and the water will find a way around it. So often when we say a bridge is out, it's not necessarily the bridge structure itself that's compromised, but you can't get to the bridge from either side. So that's what has to be rebuilt. But in the orange, it gives you a sense of, at least on the federal highways, you know, this is not FEMA. These are not FEMA numbers. But when we talk about things like the climate, or we talk about things like resiliency, federal support, the necessity of FEMA, though this is not FEMA, but obviously the necessity of the emergency relief money to get from federal highway, this really brings that to light. Central Garage,
Can I just ask you, Secretary, when, do you know when we're gonna hear back on the appeal?
I
We
don't,
don't have any.
I can't.
Oh.
I mean, I can't speak, that's the White House.
Oh, okay,
That comes directly
So
from the White
we-
House.
okay. And they haven't said we'll make a decision by like this date or something?
I am unaware of that.
Okay.
I'm unaware of that, so,
Well,
you know,
thank you.
I mean, they did receive the appeal, and it really, it wasn't just, and again, I want to be careful, I don't speak for Director Foreman, but it wasn't just an appeal of the denial for the sake of appealing the denial.
Yeah, we heard
It was the recognition of the denial, but look, we have more information, so let me say this, that if the appeal is successful, the math will actually work out more favorable for Vermont than it would have if the original application was approved. So it's a strange way to, not defending the denial, just telling you what the weird possibilities can be. Getting back to Central Garage, of course, you're all aware of the saga that started in 2023. Speaking of flooding down here on Route 302 by the wayside, and the work that our crews continue to do, we're now in the third winter since July of 2023, where our folks are working in micro space, if you will, compared to what is necessary, but they're making it happen. You've seen the data before, the number of pieces of equipment we have, active dump trucks, pickup trucks, graders, and things of that nature. You've heard us talk about the aggregated value of our fleet is about $75 million. Central Garage also keeps the DMV law enforcement units going. Excuse me. And so, you know, we'll talk much more about that starting here. The high level good news is that we have reached a settlement with FEMA. We've agreed to it, so that has put a pin in that conversation. And FEMA has offered Vermont in the low 20 millions of dollars. There's some hazard mitigation money in that we cannot use on this build project, but we can use it elsewhere. So what we're looking at doing is, you know, can we move some money that we have programmed elsewhere, somewhere else? But we have more currently from FEMA for this build than the low bid we just received. And we have sent a letter of intent. I can't name it now because we're literally in the last days of that process. But what I can say is that the low bid to build the building came in under the guaranteed money we have to build the building, not counting the hazard mitigation or the carve out for state insurance. So
Do we need to still match whatever they're giving us with 10%?
we do, and Chief Recovery Officer Farnham has a small bucket of money in his shop within AOA for that. So, you know, we're covered, but good question. Thank you. We do have a small match. So what you're seeing here is the building. This is what will be built. You're seeing one side of it. The opposite side will look the same with small changes. In other words, all the bays that you see are replicated. So this is a facility that you can drive into from either side. And, but the brickwork in the center is going to be the backside of a building. Actually, you're looking at this from, if you were standing, I guess, over at the mall, looking toward our property, this is what you see. If you're on the Payne Turnpike, you're going to see, I guess, what we would call the backside of the building. The small things, but some of the thoughtfulness put into this, and you know, Todd is in the room here, and he and Brad McAvoy, and a few other folks on our wetlands team, along with, of course, the folks at DEC. But in particular, Todd, this has been his job since August of 2023, and we're literally within days of signing a contract. So it's been a long process. And the other encouraging news we're hearing from the contractor is they believe they can get us in this building in 12 months. So we'll see, and that's good. Policy planning and intermodal development, Michelle Schaaf. This is obviously a list of the various accomplishments during the year. A few things in here I think are important to point out from my perspective. While it isn't raw, hard cash that we give to municipalities when, the legislature rightfully has some conversations about how much money do we provide to towns. But the number of towns that we actively engage with to help them do their planning would be money that they would have to spend elsewhere, other than perhaps if the RPC was helping them, which we're engaged with as well. You will see later on, of course, under F&A, the amount of training that we do with towns, but some of the roll up here is the number of highway permits that are put out. You're talking multiples per week. Act 250 applications, we go through every one. We have comments mostly, especially of course, if it's got a access or egress involvement. So there's a lot of behind the scenes work that occur in this division that, is linear in so much as it's just ongoing work. It's never finished, if you will, like a structure that's built. It's annualized. It just keeps coming. And, there's a lot there. So you'll have this in your presentation and you can go through it. We also update town mileage certificates for every town every year, every single one. And also on that note too, in case folks aren't aware, if you go to Be Transparency and you go to maps, every town is created by us, 4 towns. So when towns change something, it's the new map. So again, to do one map for one town, that may not sound like a lot, but when we annualize the effort done in our mapping sections, that's support that it's not dollar support, but it's work support.
Just a question on the maps. So the GIS group, do you work with them on the maps?
There are, VCGI is not, we do the maps. VCGI is another entity, but we do the maps.
Okay.
I mean, they do maps as well. But.
Yeah, we have our own GIS resources within the agency,
Right.
Both in our mapping group and elsewhere, because so much of our work is dependent on that use of that.
I don't know what just happened here. But.
So I guess you work with the other GIS folks, I'm sure.
Yeah, we do have interface with BCGI. We post a lot of our data to BCGI, but the actual doing of the GIS work is done within our.
Interesting.
We will work with them, but we're independent.
Okay.
And it just won't sound perhaps the way I want it to come across, but we don't rely on them to do what I'm talking about. We do it. We do it all.
And that makes sense. I just hope that they have all of the data that they need from you, because obviously.
They do. And in fact, we even pulse town offices on a weekly basis for text parcel matters. And I believe they do that annually. So every single week, if a town has had real estate transactions, we change parcel maps.
Wow.
So we have real-time information that's often used by multiple entities.
Yeah, parcel maps are valuable.
Right. And so, I mean, it's just one of these talking points that really shine a little light on the effort that so many different parts of the agency undertake on a daily basis. And in this case, correlated to towns, as well as serving state government and anyone else.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure, I've been confused and haven't gotten good information about within the rescission plan, who was laid off with the temporary positions. And I also have heard there was lots of internal movement of staff. At least anecdotally from staff who had said they had been moved.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering, my understanding was that was in part within the policy and planning division, moving folks to
It
highway.
had nothing to do with mapping, though. I mean, if you're asking about movement within the agency, yes, there was some movement of certain positions that really weren't so much directed by the result of the revenue downgrade in July. It's more of what we were seeing coming in the way of key retirements in the first half of calendar 2026.
Oh, okay. So these were folks who were not laid off. They were planning to retire, but retired early.
Well, I'm looking at both Jeremy and Michelle.
Maybe I can.
Sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So, for the record, Michelle Boone, Power Agency of Transportation. So I will be retiring now at the end of May. It's going to be the end of March. And so.
You said that last.
Thank you.
I know.
Thank you.
Amy Bell, who has been the Bureau Director for Policy Planning and Research, is also retiring.
Okay.
And so we took the opportunity to look at what kind of a realignment of resources to, you know, sort of better accomplish our job would be appropriate. And so some of the folks from policy and planning are going to be now reporting to the highway division under Jeremy's shop and working more closely with asset management, which is a great synergy because of sort of planning for asset deployment in the future. It ties in with all of that. Our research folks are going to be working at the Materials Research Bureau, which that's how we used to have it. Like some of our permitting staff are going to be working more closely with our utilities permitting people. So there's a lot of opportunity there. And then the Trini Broussard, who is my deputy, will be continuing forward with aviation, rail, public transit, and rail trails, areas where she's been historically very strongly involved. And then other policy folks will be, like me, working directly with the secretary.
Thank you so much for that explanation. I think due to the lack of information, I was filling in the blanks of like, are we losing this as a focus? And that made me concerned because this area, I think, is where we set the vision for a lot of our decisions. So thank you for that explanation. I really appreciate it.
And I take this opportunity to say, in addition to the key retirements Michelle just spoken of that are coming, former Speaker and Commissioner Mike Obahowski retired last week. And I think it's worth publicly acknowledging his lifetime service to Vermont. And in the last 10 years, he's worked for the agency. And he's done, again, a lot of, as I said in the note to him, a lot of the quiet warrior stuff, like delving into the rules and just cleaning up a lot of things that just take absolute hours, days of time. And you know, if those of you who know him, those are one of his,
He's a detail.
one of his fortes. So he retired, and we were tremendously grateful that he was with us for 10 years. Nod of the head for Mike Obahowski.
He lives by this bridge. I mean, Jen.
Just,
Maybe that was why it was built.
No, it's been a long
That was the
time ago.
condition of it.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Environmental policy and sustainability, you might recall a few years ago, we highlighted this.
I would just like to back up and say,
Sure.
part of the not knowing where you go, I think somewhat relates to the situation that Patrick has been in. Patrick does a great job.
Yep.
And, I hope everything goes well.
And thank you for that regarding Patrick's efforts, and
I hope everything goes.
and we will pass that on to him. Environmental policy and sustainability, much of this is Patrick's wheelhouse, and which he is still overseeing. There's a few things in here. Let me start frankly like with the last bullet, just to sort of, it's quite a bit of a recap on a lot of the programs that you had agreed to fund with respect to, vehicle replacements and enticements and incentives to purchase EVs or to update older vehicles. And, you'll see in some talking points in here, 7,000 different incentives across Vermont. And, 79% of the funding went to lower income Vermonters based on the metrics that were set forth in the language, which is noteworthy. Those programs have cashed out, if you will. And so, they were certainly successful programs. And then working back up to the top bullet. This is the NEVI conversation. You certainly recall some of the headlines about that funding being paused. The funding was released. The pause was lifted as we believed that we were told it would be, it was. And the team did a tremendous job, just an absolute tremendous job obligating the full $21 million to add 19 locations across Vermont. And a location could have multiple plugs. So I believe the math worked out somewhere in the 60s, actually, as far as the number of individual vehicles that could be plugged in. And these are superchargers. It may not be the right terminology, but these are level 3 chargers on steroids, like the one in Bradford. that's been running now for a year and a half or so. Allocated, as you see in the, well, obviously the mileage-based user fee that as well as Patrick's lead on that again this year and come together. And I realize, of course, that it's of great interest to this committee. And I saw with interest your testimony from the person from Hawaii. Very interesting. Yep.
I thought she did a great job.
Yep. So again, this covers pretty much that area of location. Public transit, we've said for years that Vermont is really one of the leaders in the country, regardless of what sometimes I think a Vermonter might experience or rightfully, how can we improve what we have? But it's still the case that many states envy what Vermont has in both, whether it's fixed routes or rides on demand. And you'll see that on the fixed route basis, the graph at the bottom, it's recovering from the pandemic. I mean, the pandemic shut so many things down, and there were many reasons. It wasn't just social distancing; it was staying home, don't go to work, in person, work remotely, and then many, not even counting the state, but many employers changed their posture regarding work. So there's a whole myriad of reasons why public transit saw some really volatile numbers. But the good news in this is if you look at where it's come in the last 5 years, it's come back not quite to where it was pre-pandemic, but there aren't a whole lot of data points across many things you measure that might be better than what they might have been pre-pandemic. But they're working hard to get things back. There've been changes and fluctuations, as you know, and you've had testimony, and we'll have more testimony from the transit providers. And Ross McDonald, who runs the shop, will be in. And so it's coming along. The rail program, again, I referenced the 29 bridge projects that you saw Paul Libby talking about in the video. And again, it's quite a thing when you look at, so let's check my recollection when I said there were 13 of 174 15 years ago, and now there are 161 of 174 now that are up to the national standard. One might say, well, yeah, but it's been 15 years. But what everybody has to remember is these are grants only. There's no formula money in rail. And there's no formula money in aviation. So this required just constant focus on grant opportunity, tremendous horsepower by the federal delegation over the last 2 decades, excuse me, seeing that Vermont was heard when it sat at the grant table, if you will. And as far as numbers coming back, I point to the Amtrak bullet. We're seeing increases over prior Amtrak operation, frankly, that exceeded our modeling. So at this point, Amtrak is really, really successful, and it has increased our modeling, increased over what we had modeled for passenger ridership recovery. We continue to work with Canada, New York, Amtrak. Hopefully in a week or so, we can report on at least some more effort regarding Central Station and pre-clearance. So maybe in a couple of weeks, we can at least share some more news. I'm not saying it's going to be done, but anyhow. And, again, rail is too often the victim of damage as well when it comes to storms. Rail is FEMA eligible because it's owned by the state. Will qualify that statement. The NECR line out here in Montpelier, in Berlin Junction, running down to White River is not. That's owned by Genesee and Wyoming. But this line here through town and everything else that the state of Vermont owns is eligible for FEMA. They are not necessarily more complex projects than road projects. They seem to take more time to close out than road projects do, because the good news with road projects is we work with federal highway. And rail projects with FEMA just seem to be more unique for them. And they, to their credit though, in 23, they brought a particular team in that was more used to working with applicants on rail projects than, let's say, local roads even. They brought in the local road folks, and the rail trail folks, but they brought in a group that had the most experience just to talk to us about the rail damage we had. So, but you know, I say it's more complicated because it was May of 2024 when we closed out the last FEMA PA from Tropical Storm Irene, and it was in your district, Senator White. It was 12 years to close the last project from Irene, and it was a rail project. All right.
And we love our new platform.
Yes, it's come out nicely. I believe it's the next slide here. Yeah, there's something. Here we go. This is the terminal in the picture. This is the Northeast Kingdom International Airport in Coventry. This terminal is, you heard about this last year. This was built over the fall. It's up and running. It's fully occupied by the FBO and it's complete. And this terminal is the terminal design that we'll move forward with at other airports when we build new terminals. So, you know, in the future, we're currently looking at Middlebury. We're currently looking at Springfield and anywhere else that we do build a new terminal or a terminal, if you will, because Middlebury, I'm not sure I would call that a terminal today. But nonetheless, well, here was Northeast Kingdom, frankly, but very much in my mind, like the state police did close to 20 years ago. I believe Tasha Wallace was the commissioner of BGS then when they came up with the design of the barracks that you saw built in St. Albans and New Haven and Westminster, not the remodeled one here in Middlesex or the Berlin barrack, but you know, this model of a building makes sense because you've got the plans. You don't have to spend money engineering and designing. You just spend, you know, the planning part is specific to the site and it's able to be added onto. It was built with that in mind. So from a structural perspective, especially in this location, because I think all of us want to see the day when there's enough international travel by air and the cooperation of Customs and Border Protection when they could put some sort of a pre-clearance there, or at least receive planes that now have to go to Burlington to be cleared and then back to where they're going.
Senator Christian.
Where's the NEJ International?
Here's Newport.
Okay, and then any update on the Lindenville Airport?
No, not since I was in a couple of weeks ago. It's still between the applicant and FAA.
Okay, you're waiting, so the,
Right, it's,
between the AOD and the applicant.
well, I mean,
That has been,
the applicant has to be the one that just agrees to the options the FAA provided. So we submitted the purchase and sale agreement that was signed for FAA review. And FAA denied it in its original form, but came back and said, here are 4 suggestions we would make, you know, to get to yes,
okay,
if you will. So when I say deny, I want to be thoughtful in how that comes across. They didn't agree with it as it was submitted,
okay.
but they said, consider these options instead. And the latest I've heard is
And are
that
those options public, or
that's still a negotiation between FAA and the applicant.
we don't know what they are.
We
We, the public.
That's correct, right. Really kind of like this, if somebody was selling a business, the
Yeah.
purchase and sale agreement is private
Sure.
until it's sold. We've reviewed it with the applicant and, you know, AOT, I think, thinks that there's possibly a way forward here. But at the end of the day, the applicant has to be the one that agrees to that.
And there's no timeline.
No, I don't believe, well, the timeline really is the one set by the U, which was 2027. I think that at least the permission to sell the airport. And then we'd have to we certainly would expect that would happen. It's, you know, Kraft LLC is the applicant. I think we talked about that.
Yeah.
And if you follow the news, I think you've seen a lot of news about those individuals having a lot of integration and a lot of opportunity with FAA at this point. And I just hope that frankly, this topic benefits from that.
Yeah. Likewise.
Administration division, again, this is Maureen and Jana. Left side in orange is the size of the division and the budget. The blocks in the center are the different offices within it. I think you've heard from all of these. I will point out as we go a little further, learning and development, Vermont local roads, Because as I said, when I was talking earlier about planning, the services that the group and FNA provide to municipalities in many ways is actually measurable dollar wise, but it's real. And that's something that we ought to talk more about, I think. Oops. Facilities is one of them, and what you're looking at here, the two on the left are on Lower Newton Street in St. Albans. That's the old District 8 site. District 8 moved to the new building, and we had 9 or so acres down there. So these are just the two pictures on the left. And I'd not made a decision yet on what to do with the property. There's been several outreaches, but we haven't decided as an enterprise of government what to do with it yet. There's an armory right next door. So in total, there's more state land right there than just us. And, you know, it requires, you know, thoughtful planning on where to go in the future. And, you know, the district has gotten most of the stuff out of the cold storage sheds, but, you know, they probably still have a few more things because there was no urgency. However, DMV early last fall, I think it was, the commissioner lost the lease that it had for its facility in St. Albans by the hospital. It was through no fault of DMV. The landlord is making some changes. So we started looking for where could we operate to serve the public. And the first thing we did is we looked at existing state buildings. There's some office buildings downtown. We were just told there just wasn't any space that could accommodate that. So we decided what we would do is we would, with a gentle touch, we would renovate the office building of the District 8 site, if nothing else, as a location which is very adequate until such time other decisions may or may not be made on that property, which didn't necessarily preclude leaving that as it is as well. So that's where it's located. And on the left, this is our, I believe it's the West Danville Garage. This is maybe a few miles past Joe's Pond, sort of halfway between Joe's Pond and Danville Village, Marty's. And before you get to the hardware store, you know where that is. And so this is a small building we're putting up just to house some of the equipment that we have that helps to maintain the Lamont Valley Rail Trail. So I talked about the work we do with municipalities. These are folks, our folks, and these are employees of towns, many of whom we represent, especially the column on the right, rather, my right. 117 total training sessions. We estimate this cost, and these aren't just wags. I mean, we pay trainers. We have contracts with trainers. So we have real backup when we say this is what this costs us, and this is what we give for free to the towns. And then, including in the case of the flagging in the center, 64 BLR flag, that's a certification, and CDL training. And we have a really interesting program working now with Department of Motor Vehicles where, and I'm looking to the commissioner, so if I start to misspeak, he can do the third base coach signal, but where they will train a V-Trans employee to be a practical examiner, which means that the employee who's taken the CDL training we provide could be tested by us, and it all could be in-house. Now, we don't necessarily profess to suggest that, you know, with any amount of capacity we would able to do that with, but it's a big step. It's a huge step because probably 5 years ago, the federal government tightened down on the credentialing for this long before the current conversations about CDLs, and really with an interest in making the training and the education better so that it had safer outcomes on the highway. So for federal motor carrier safety to allow DMV to train a state employee, excuse me, apologize, is a big thing for us, especially coming from the clampdown 5 years ago. And I'd like to think it somewhat has to do with quality of effort that you see out of our training center and our V-Trans employees who are our CDL trainers. So there's a difference between being a CDL trainer and a certified tester, if that's the right terminology.
And this is only for AOT employees.
Well, it is to this point, but I don't believe we are closing the door. It's a capacity thing. That's all. Department of Motor Vehicles, perfect segue. This is broken up into the divisions there, so there's more than 171 employees across the department. But a couple of I think you had some testimony already yesterday from DMV, or you will have it soon. And I don't want to, I'll let the commissioner and his team go into more of the detail, but there's an awful lot that's been accomplished at DMV in the last several years, and especially in the last year. One of the interesting things that I think has gotten lost in all of the conversation today regarding all things motor vehicles are the kiosks that you see the gentleman on the left-hand picture. It's a self-service touchscreen kiosk, and one could envision the day where those could possibly be put anywhere. It's a matter of, the equipment being safe, not smashed, depending on where you put it. So if you're thinking, which we have looked at, we have literally looked at freestanding ATM type machines. But every time you think of that, you have to spend more money to buy some piece of hardware that's robust, hopefully heavy enough that it can't be carried off, or strong enough that it can't be beaten. So everything comes with cost factors, but there are a lot of these now popping up, at least South Burlington, I know, so that a citizen can opt to, okay, I'm going to walk over here and try that before, especially if you're all walking and you didn't maybe have the reservation. The other thing, when you see the person standing at the counter, we all remember getting our driver's license and then having to go around the corner with somebody and have your picture taken. Well, many of our stations, not all of them yet, but many of our stations can take the picture right there so you don't have to move. And that just saves time. So the efficiencies that are being accomplished. And of course, you've heard the commissioner and others and me talk about the core system, which I hope is the next slide, and I think it is.
Can I just,
Yeah, go
a
ahead.
quick suggestion, you could put those in town halls, because there's
Sure.
folks there. But then just
Yeah, street light.
another, is the goal for the DMV offices to have them open more than 2 days a week? Because,
The satellites? Well, I mean,
they're really, really helpful, and
Yeah.
they're actually a good public service, and
Right.
the people were always wonderful.
Right.
And when my kids went to get their licenses, it was a really nice experience as compared to other states. I mean, that's somewhere where we are so much better than other states.
oh,
And,
that's wonderful.
when people move here and they go through that, it just validates their decision.
Well, thank you very much, Senator. That's good to hear that personal experience. And, I think, is it a goal? Yes, but I think like every goal and every aspiration, we have to balance, and in this committee more than anybody, as well your counterparts in the House, the affordability piece. In other words, we do have to weigh the throughput in the satellites and the cost of us to be there,
Right.
meaning the team, because we send people by vehicle, down there. We carry the lease cost of all of those sites, with the exception of Dummerston, which is really sort of an internal thing because it's our building anyway. But in, White River, right?
Yeah, Dummerston's the one
Well, the one in
I
White
hear
River
about
is now
it.
ours
Right,
as well. I
yeah,
was thinking of the former one in
Yeah.
White River. So that one is ours as well, but we
Right.
still have to send a team there.
No, I understand. And,
Right.
and so you have your costs, but then the public has their costs.
They do.
And so their costs are pretty significant to them.
Sure.
That's one thing I hear a
Right.
lot
Right.
is, when they have to go to Bennington.
Right. Well, and that really reinforces the why we did what we did in the St. Albans slides that I was showing you when, we lost the lease there. We knew that, because really a lot of people from Franklin County plan their DMV visit days based on the days that those were open.
Yeah.
So, or, maybe to Burlington.
And the kiosks are good. That would
Yeah,
help.
they are.
Yeah.
The
but there
thought
are
about
some
the
things
town
where you
clerks
need-
is a great one. States like New Hampshire, you have to go to a town clerk to register your vehicle.
Yeah, and you know the registration fees they pay,
Very much more.
right? We should talk about that some.
Senator White.
Thank you, Chair Westman. So I did just want to ask, because I was very surprised by the Vermont State Employees, the union had done their annual satisfaction survey.
Mhm.
And my understanding in the past is the Agency of Transportation has performed very well in that survey, with folks responding that they're satisfied with their workplace. And it was surprising to me because we learned in Senate Government Operations that DMV was now ranking in the top, in the bottom third, so the most least satisfied of departments in that survey for the first time.
Mhm.
And I just wanted to ask you a little bit about that, because one of the questions that was such a deviation between the other state employees in DMV was the question of like where DMV scored particularly low,
Mhm.
was an employee answering the question, I'm encouraged to share ideas on improving either service delivery or business process efficiency. And the statewide average was around 66%, and DMV was around 50%.
Mhm.
So just about half of the employees at DMV who were surveyed didn't feel that they're encouraged to share ideas around innovation or business efficiency. And that surprised me. So I just wanted to put it out there that when you think about this conversation, I think about half, based on the survey, about half of your employees aren't feeling included in the conversation in this department.
Of those who responded.
Yeah, and they have, over 1,800 folks responded. And they do have they have a whole, they statistically analyze it to make sure it's within a
Right.
band
It's
of,
it's human resources survey, not the union survey.
the one I'm looking at is the union survey.
Sure.
This is what they shared. We had-
Actually, I'm not sure I've seen the union survey, but I'm gonna
to.
go to the commissioner, but the one comment you made though about, I just want to understand, you said over 1,008. You must be referring to, that's the entirety of the union survey, because that's 3 times the number of employees we have at the DMV.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, okay.
Yeah, actually, you're right. It is actually the Department of Human Services table. My apologies.
Okay.
It's not a survey that's done
Okay. Yeah.
by, and so table 4 is what I was looking at. It looks like, 72% they had an overall response rate of 2025 employees. And I could tell you the number of people who responded, but it might take me a minute.
No, that's fine. And your point's well taken. And I'm gonna look at the commissioner for perhaps a more detailed response.
Absolutely. Andrew Collier, Commissioner DMV for the record. I would just say, Senator, DMV saw a 41.6% employee response rate in 2024. We saw a percentage rate, 52% this prior year. To your specific area that you mentioned, and this is not the downside, that we're not working to improve that metric. But from year prior at 33%, we're at 42.7% for 2025. So I think that trajectory, I think we're
Okay. Well,
I mean,
and to be, I don't want to come off as saying this callous. I am, as a new management team in there, I actually would have thought we would have saw closer in line numbers a year prior. I'd like to say the management team there is doing a phenomenal job trying to bring these percentages up, bring these numbers up, employee morale. As I mentioned, my first day in there is of the utmost importance to me. I've come from state government my entire career. So that's not to minimize what the score is. We are always aspirationally moving up, but I think that trajectory, like to hope we're moving
The right direction.
and I'll layer that with last year was the team did a phenomenal job. They also had a lot on their plate with 2 simultaneous IT projects going. And the team was very stretched. So that's not lost on me with that team. They did a phenomenal job with the resources that we had.
Well, I really appreciate that. I think DMV is one of the few departments where almost every Vermonter is going to interact with them. And the
absolutely.
morale experience that you have with the employee at the other end can greatly impact your interpretation of how the
Yeah,
government
you're
works.
No, you're right.
But yeah, I would definitely check out cable 4 because AOT overall scored very high, but DMV oddly enough was one of the
Okay,
lowers.
no, thank you for that. And to your point, though, you're right. And we're gonna see that Vermonter before any other agency of state government, most likely. I mean, we get a Vermonter before the tax department. You get them at 15, really. If they're an anxious kid, they wanted a permit.
And their
Um,
parents.
And their parents want the permit.
Yeah.
Most cases. Right.
Two for one.
This slide really, I wanna talk about this because this is a success, but I also want to talk about, before I do talk about the core project, I want to talk about the Vermont Hall Pass. I didn't see it on here. If I did, if it was on the previous one, I missed it. Well, it's not E-Services. Before the core project, we undertook modifying or modernizing the e-permitting for overweight, over length, over height. And that is a significant amount of business. We could quantify how much that is as far as the number of permits that are issued on an annual basis. But it speaks directly to the economy and to commerce because it's often moving heavy pieces of equipment from A to B, to build something. And serving that part of industry is crucial for us to be competitive and user-friendly. And that's just rolled out as well, but I think it's perhaps often overshadowed even by us when we talk about the slide you see before you. And that is the core modernization project. This was the 50-year-old legacy software system that went back to the COBOL process. Unbelievable, the job DMV did before this has been completed. And again, for those that have been around a while, whether in or out of government, you might recall EDS, Ross Bros Company, maybe 20 years ago, Senator. DMV modernization launched. EDS sold in the midst of that effort to Hewlett Packard, I believe, or
Packard, it took us years to get
Thank
the
you.
money back.
Hewlett Packard, when they bought the company, they didn't agree to buy the contract or the demand, if you will, the obligation between the state of Vermont and EDS, Electronic Data Systems, through no fault of DMV. But yet the headlines were, yet again, and this isn't an aim at the Vermont press. It's like the movie to the TV show DMV. It's easy to pick on, but a government IT project. Well, on that, the state of Vermont recovered every penny, but that part didn't get in the head.
But it took a year.
It did. Oh, it took forever. You're right. This project, we're not running around here like a bandy rooster with a plucked out chest, but quietly, there's a lot of credit that is due. The FAST team, who's the contractors who worked for the state of Vermont before, they did this with the tax department, as well as the employees of the Department of Motor Vehicles. And the prior commissioner and deputy under which this launched. So I want to acknowledge all of that. Most importantly, the trust of the legislature to approve $50 million for an IT project for government. At a DMV, which historically government IT projects have, anxious challenges. And, you trusted that this project would come together. It couldn't have come together without the money and the support of the legislature. It was delivered on time and on budget. And that's another thing that has to be said, because it's not often the case. And it may not be the case in the next time we try something. And there's so many factors that impact on time and on budget, much of which are sometimes out of the control of anyone. We were fortunate, but it was a tremendous amount of work. The contractor moved a couple of dozen families to Vermont for the last 3 years. They bought homes, they had children, they have kids in school. And we moved 30 to 40 at the peak, people from across the street to Berry City Place. And all they did was work with FAST on the core system. So going back to your prior question about employee satisfaction and the comments the commissioner made, you had people across the street and elsewhere that were carrying extra load so colleagues could focus on this system that nobody else saw happening until it was delivered in November of 25 on time and on budget. Thank you for hearing that.
I can.
Yeah.
Add one, I'm sorry, also special thanks to, agency mentioned, or, ADS.
Yes, Thanks.
So would not have,
that's correct.
they were complete partners in this, they have people
Yeah.
embedded with our team,
I-
and they were,
Grateful you caught that, going back to Secretary Quinn and obviously Secretary Riley Hughes. We couldn't have done it without ADS as well, because this stuff is not what we do.
I just have one quick comment, which is great, and it's a good model for all of the other updates that we need to
It
do.
is, in fact.
And we're looking at it that way.
Yeah. Now, and I believe, I don't know this to be a fact, but I believe labor is looking at, if not the same contractor,
There's so many,
but I don't. wanna
there's
speak.
so many updates that are necessary, but it's great to have
Well, it
an
is.
example of one that was done well.
It is, and quite frankly, we got onto this because of the success of tax.
Mm,
And I remember the
All right.
meeting when we heard about that, we were with ADS and it was Tom Bonomo with ADS, who's our liaison for the agency. And he talked about this because I believe he worked with the fast folks for tax. And I can remember we said, well, maybe we got to talk to these people first or as well, right? And so here we are.
Yeah.
We went out to bid and it's been a tremendous amount of work. And the accomplishments for the user is really not just, the citizens, yes, but even our employees. I remember going to Newport and watching an employee get excited because she could create a new title right then and there, including the water bars and all the security, and hand it to the buyer. Whereas if you were a satellite like that, and Newport's one of our bigger facilities like Bennington or South Burlington, where they would have to mail it to Montpelier after they took the paperwork and the money, US Post Office, and then Montpelier would mail it to the buyer and they could hand it to the debtor. And she was really tickled about that. So,
yeah, because your employees care.
yeah, they do. They do care. You're absolutely
Yeah.
right. The Enforcement and Safety Division, overseen by Director Cochran, who I think was in the room earlier. I think you know what the DMV enforcement team does, safety and enforcement. They, not just the trucks, which are huge, literally the effort is huge, but all of our inspection stations, all of the car dealers, they testify in cases that have to do with car condition. Pardon me. But the uniform and non-uniform, but sworn officers also get involved in traditional law enforcement. And I may have to rely on somebody to read the last page or two. I'll apologize. We work with the state police. We work with task forces. We've got 3 canines now. 2 of them are traditional, if you will. One of them is trained now, is spun up to train for gunpowder residue. We've assisted in a homicide in Burlington. It's a rare talent. I may need to excuse myself a moment. Michelle,
We get a great slide set.
We do.
Maybe I'll turn it over to the commissioner.
sure. Yeah, just finish on that, so that canine's, consistent with, Burlington on a few cases. And it's been, very successful, that we've had, that dog. And the team, is just, we're just rolling out. We assisted with State Police, who weren't kind of in the news as much, and I'm okay with that. With Burlington, effort that we had, our team focused primarily on traffic enforcement. Our detectives spent a day trying to do, some of the warrants that were outstanding. Working with Burlington PD with that.
Okay.
What's early morning snow patrol?
So that is, state police, we work with state police. State police used to have it, and that's part of us helping out, just because of manpower. We'll have team sign on at, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning when there's a known snow event or ice storm like, we had last week. and they will be out in force on the interstates.
In anticipation of crash.
Yeah, crashes, slide offs, making sure, just because historically, Vermont, there's not a lot of traffic, so if you're sliding off, or especially cold weather,
Right.
that we have people that get there quickly and assist.
Everybody in the hallway thought the Senate Transportation Committee was beating me up for that.
Another day.
I'm not exactly sure what we talked about canines, the patrolling that the commissioner was talking about. You know, fraudulent activity across the spectrum, as it says. It's a constant event with us, and we pursue that in a criminal nature according to the level of fraud that's being perpetrated. We've also been part of, which isn't on here, I think. We've been part of the effort in Burlington. Our colleagues with state police, you know, have been really high profile with their boots on the ground effort around the marketplace. It's been a partnership between the city of Burlington and the state police and the DMV and liquor and lottery. Primarily because, you know, the wardens, of course, this began in the fall, so it was just a really bad time of year for them. They were really busy with the hunting season. So state sworn services combining with the city of Burlington. DMV was working the traditional motor vehicle work. The city will tell you that they really weren't doing a lot of that in the last 3 years or so. You know, it's a different environment, of course, than the interstate, but you've got the Beltline in Burlington. So DMV worked Christmas Eve, they worked Christmas Eve day, Christmas Eve night, Christmas Day, as well as others. But the point is, this was an overtime effort. This was voluntary by our officers, but it was directed that we would be there. Fortunately, we had more than enough people to do it. So we were a force multiplier, really good cooperation with the city of Burlington. And we also concentrated in concentric rings further away from the core of the city, so that for really a couple of reasons. One, you know, the people that were creating the problems that you've all read about in the core of the city, a lot of this sometimes naturally will get pushed out further. And we didn't want to fail to know that. And we wanted them to know we know that. So, you know, our visibility was not so much in the core of the city, although a lot of activity with blue lights on Main Street and Pearl Street was, you know, one stop can send a message to 100 cars in the 5 or 10 minutes that the stop is occurring. But you know, things like DUI arrests and things that just weren't able to be gotten to, and including life-saving things. I mean, we interacted with a motorist that was having a life-altering medical event and rendered life-saving support until EMS could get there. And that anybody would do. But, you know, the effort, I think it was well received by our employees. It was well received. Commissioner Morrison shared an email this morning in a meeting we were in from Chief Burke in Burlington. And so they really stepped up to do a lot. And I'll leave it there. If there's any questions. I think we're pretty close to the end too. Okay, well, am I going the wrong way?
Yeah, you've done that.
Sorry about that.
It's a big project.
There we go. Compliance and audit enhancements, you know, we have a lot of that going on with all the dealerships and all the cash that comes in through IFTA and IRP. Procurement. We talked about the St. Albans branch. Social media, a lot of interest on a lot of the different things that we put out. Random, I mean, well, it's not random, it's all related to transportation or vehicles, but we put out things on like recalls, for example. You know, just anything to do with a motor vehicle that a citizen might miss someplace else. Just on our social media pages. And I believe that is it. Not going any further, so I think that's the last page.
Great job.
So that ends the PowerPoint. And if there's time left on your part, we're happy to answer any questions or at least take any questions you have. And
How is VT buying going?
I guess I would probably look at Maureen to, if you wouldn't please.
Sure, Maureen Parker, Creation Division. BTVIS is going well. AOT does a lot of second tier solicitations. So we do a lot of like primary retainer contracts and then we do orders off of those. And so those are not in BTVIS yet. And so because those are not in BTVIS yet, we haven't had to do many procurement, but we have done a few. And so
It's good to hear. Because I don't hear that across the board. Or at least not before, so maybe it's gotten better. The original rollout.
Yeah, I think that's probably the right frame. We saw a lot of emails. I think it's gotten better.
Good start to the year.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Well,
Happy to talk about
Yeah.
anything you'd like. Except the budget.
Yeah, I know, exactly. It's like,
we can't, and that we'll get to. So
So I'm sure.
are there any questions?
A
Go ahead.
question about, project planning, what you think of the year, Jeremy? And on the prioritization, I think it was last year where I ran with the whole system that we have for project prioritization, which that's the acronym, I think.
VPFP2.
Yeah, you only use that for the projects when there's extra funding, or
True acting to actually program a project and really, we could use it throughout and we sort of do, but it's so heavy weighted towards asset condition, right? That's where like the RPCs don't have the luxury given our current situation to propose alternative projects. We have prepared some product to help describe how we on an annual basis describe what moves forward to construction. Because it kind of is two-step process. What gets programmed, which is really VPSP2, and then just given the duration and time it takes to progress and develop a project, then there's, okay, we're developing a budget for FY27, let's say, what's in, what's out. And we've got some materials prepared that I'd be happy to.
yeah, we come in and talk more about that, about how the agency makes that prioritization process. Because the other project was very structured and it was clear kind of how things were scored and programmed. So however you can describe the prioritization project, it would be great.
Yep, we've got that prepared, so I'll be happy to come back and testify to that.
It's on our list.
Okay.
Yeah, and to follow up on that, I think what I've heard is that the role of the towns, or not the towns rather, but the TAPs in the regional commissions, that their role is different than it was, and it might be different again soon. So, but let's just talk about that in that conversation, because that's also about prioritization.
Sure. And that's where there's really that two-step process, what gets programmed versus what actually gets funded in any given fiscal year.
Yeah, but that's really important to the towns, those priorities, obviously. And they should be. Thanks.
I think at this point, we're gonna say thank you.
Thank you.
And if you could take us offline, Megan.